welcome everybody. Welcome to
Get a
the.
load of this guy with intro music and everything.
It came with the platform, man, which is how I knew it was royalty-free music there, right? Got to be careful about that. Any rate, welcome to Tales from the Jar Side, the live stream. This is our third event, actually. We did one with Dan Vega before, and we did one other one. I've got the recordings and everything that I could share out. But this time we have the awesome Nate Schutta, and you can see his title there, Architect as a Service.
See, the first person to call me that, I thought, that's pretty fitting. That's a pretty good description of what I do. Go places, talk to people about architecture. Although I will admit, I did sound the acronym out in my head and realized it may not have been intended as a compliment. So,
well, it's one of those gags that it needs the right audience because it cracked me up, and I told it to my wife and she didn't get it. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. This is really funny.
It's funny. Yeah. He's like, no, you're not that funny. You're really not. I'm sorry. I love you, but you're just not that funny.
All right, wait a minute. I got to play my 5-second intro. You ready?
Okay.
Ready for this? This is I put this together with Canva, and I just recently updated it. Okay, here we go. What do you think?
Yeah, I like that. I too have been playing around with Canva. That's how desperate I've gotten with this world. I am not a graphics designer, though. I can assure you of that.
Yeah, well, this has changed my life. I mean, that Canva stuff. I mean, that's how I got the little QR code in the corner. If anybody hadn't noticed that's pointing impressive. to the Tales from the Jar Side YouTube channel. So just to let people know and get in it. That way, I can share it and they can jump into the live stream, etc.
Exactly.
Oh, I should have been put on the comments here. There we go. Oh, good. Simon's here. That's excellent.
Hi, Simon.
Date. You like the intro there? There's one. Excellent. So we are live streaming on both YouTube and on LinkedIn. I don't know if anything is going on. It says I'm live on Twitter, but I don't know if that's true or not. Now let's actually get to the important part. So why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself? Find out, because I mean, I've known you for 10, 15 years, something. It's been a while now.
A while. Yeah. We don't need to get into the details of how long we've known each other. Let's just say we each had more hair and less of it was gray.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay.
Just it's relative, to be fair. It's a good question. So it's weird. So Simon made this comment. I had to check the date to see who was on which side of the hosting duties here. And I admit it's real weird to be on, I guess, the right side of the window as opposed to the left side. So this is not my normal domain. I prefer to be the one asking the questions. But
right.
So I guess it depends how far back you want to go. But I've been doing software longer than I care to admit. And lots of Java apps over the years, taught a lot of people Java, architected a bunch of Java apps, et cetera, et cetera. I've spent, where you and I think first really encountered each other was the speaking circuit, right? Was doing events. And, I sort of fell into that. I was on this project with a friend of mine, Nathan Good, who lives nearish me, and I ride bikes together occasionally. And Nathan and I went and got coffee one morning, and he made this sort of offhanded comment about, that he spent a lot of time at Caribou when he was writing his book. And I thought, wait, what, you wrote a book? Like, normal people don't write books. That's only like thought leaders get to write books. And so I started, okay, fair point. I can actually say that I go back all the way to the Oak era if you really want to feel old.
I didn't use Oak. My first Java version was 1.0.6, I think, or maybe 1.0.8, something like that. So early, but not Oak. No.
You then remember when the Java in a Nutshell book was actually like thin.
I remember when you actually could read the entire JDK library, and it was only a few hundred classes. It wasn't that bad. There were packages I still didn't know, but basically I knew. Anyway, go ahead. You were saying.
So Nathan is the one who really kind of opened me up to the idea that, any of us can do this, right? It isn't some magical space only inhabited by quote unquote thought leaders. And so that kind of opened my eyes to that. I co-wrote a book on Ajax with another friend of mine, Ryan Osselson. And that
I
just kind
bought
of,
that book. In fact, that was one time when we were first talking, you mentioned that book and I went, "Hey, wait a minute." I went upstairs and pulled it off my bookshelf. And
this
I'm like,
one.
"This is you, huh?" Had
Yeah.
no idea.
Yeah, exactly. And so that fell into me doing some presentations. Ryan and I kind of went around the Twin Cities area doing presentations on it, and that kind of fell into, hey, I should do this more locally. And I kind of pestered some people and started applying places. And next thing I know, I started speaking at conferences, and the rest is history, I guess, as they say. And oh gosh, Daniel's here too. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
Dan the
both
man,
Dan.
right?
We got both Dans. We got Dan and we got Daniel. So we got all our Dans.
See, I don't, you know this platform better than I do. I can't tell who's here. I can't even tell how many, really.
I can only tell by the fact that they've made a comment. So I see
Yes,
that
exactly.
Dan made a comment earlier.
That's all I have. So, okay, just go with it because I will do that. I just, Dan, yeah, okay. This is Danny knows, of course.
Ooh, that's a good question. Who would win in Daniel versus Dan?
Look, do that on their own channel.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that. I'd be interested in that.
So, at any rate, I first met you when you were at the Travelers. And you had been on the tour for a couple of years. You were really early. The tour, by the way, for those who are not aware, is the No Fluff, Just Stuff conference tour. For those people who are not in the US, it's a series of weekend conferences that take place in cities all over the country. It's all domestic at this point, all US based. And they do, I don't know, between 7 and 12, 13, 14, something like that, events a year. Plus, they do what they call the destination shows. There's a few during the week shows. The regular shows were on the weekend. So they'd be like half a day Friday and then Saturday, Sunday. And this is how I got involved in speaking. I got to be on the tour back when I was brought in mostly to talk about groovy, believe it or not, topics. But you were one of the early members. And I guess what I should point out is that this is unlike most conferences in that it's pretty much the same core group of people who go from city to city over a weekend, because that way you don't miss too much of your regular schedule, and give as many as, I don't know, a dozen talks in a weekend you could wind up doing.
Yeah.
We've done like 14 or something crazy like that, or we've done 4. I mean, you give them, and we generally rotate the talks every year with some updates mid-year maybe. And that's how it's grown over the years. So you were like speaker number, I don't know, within the top first 10.
Well, it's funny because everybody you talk to is like, well, it was better before, and it's like, the original.
What do you mean, like, everybody?
Well, it just seems like everybody always talks about, well, I was part of this core. There was definitely a core group that predated me for sure.
Yeah,
and
right.
Many people point to them as being the sort of like, peak of the pinnacle of the speaker core, because, it was Dave Thomas and, I think, I can't remember who else, but I know Dave was there because I remember talking with Justin Gatlin once, and I asked him, why was everybody using a Mac? Because this was back when Macs were like, ooh, this weird thing, and he just kind of looked at me and he said, well, I mean, part of it's the fact that, well, like, Dave's using one. And so he made this crack that if Dave showed up with a ping pong paddle and a notebook, we'd all go get ping pong paddles and a notebook, and we wouldn't know what to do with it, but we'd be like, we're ready, just tell us what to do, Dave. So there's definitely a little bit of that. But, I will say the beauty of that series is it gave you as a speaker an opportunity to really hone your craft, and give you a chance to do the same presentation over and over again, and really figure out what that presentation's about. And that's not something we get all the time. It definitely skewed my view of what normal is, because typical weekend would be 4 to 8 talks. And I remember doing, I think it was Java Zone. And my wife pinged me while I was over there and said, well, like, how many talks are you giving? And I think I was doing 1 or 2. And she was just incredulous. Like, wait, you went all the way to Norway to do 2 talks? And I'm like, yeah, and now doing this more often, it's kind of weird. Like, I was in Portugal last week for J Nation, and I did a keynote and I did a workshop, and that's now become more normal for me. And so when I do, like, UberConf is coming up in July, and I look at the schedule, I'm like, man, that's so many talks. That's going to be that's going to be tiring, so, but you get used to it. And it certainly was a fantastic opportunity to deliver material, get feedback, iterate on it, deliver it again, and really hone that material and hone some jokes and things that you can apply to future talks. And I met some amazing people too. I mean, that's the other part of it. Jay's got a great collection of speakers, and some of my best friends, frankly, are from that era.
You have one of my favorite No Fluff stories is features you actually.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it was that I used to pay to go to the conference.
So did I. I went as an attendee at least twice.
Right. I went. I was bugging Jay to try to get to be on the tour, and of course
Right.
that was always a long-term task. It was never easy to get him to go ahead and pull the trigger on that. But I remember once, and I think this was when I was already on the tour or whatever, I was going to go to one of your talks. I don't remember which one it was. It was something architecture related, because of course it was. And I'm sitting there, and it's like 2 minutes before the talk's supposed to start. And you wandered in, just actually it's more of a saunter, just casually wandered in with, your laptop in one hand, a cup of coffee in the other hand,
Yep.
turned around at the front of the room, put down your laptop, took a drink, and said, "Okay, what am I talking about?"
Yeah, pretty much.
Everybody just cracked up because it was perfect, because it was one of a number, and you knew what they all were, and you went, right. Oh, okay. My story, by the way, related to that, is one time years ago, I was giving a talk at a No Fluff conference on Groovy, and somebody mentioned the Spock framework, and I said, yeah, there's a sometimes there's generally a good Spock talk on the tour as well. And somebody looked at the schedule and said, yeah, it's tomorrow and you're giving it. And I went, oh, that's a good one, actually.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorites. It's one of the best.
It was actually. So, but yeah, you really become accustomed. You get so comfortable and so experienced at presenting the same information. Now, the audience is always different, and therefore the questions are often different. And of course, you have to update things all the time, but roughly how it's going to go. Your timing is set. Yeah. I always kind of feel sorry for the people in the first couple destinations, because that's when everybody's 100%. Working out their talks. Yeah. And I also feel a little sorry for the people at the end of the year, because then they're getting speakers who sometimes start getting bored,
I just want this talk to be over.
Until you get wrapped up in it, Yeah. But then there's the whole mass in the middle that works out well, Right. And so at any rate, you may have noticed that in the description of this live stream, I casually referred to you as the best speaker on the tour.
Thank you.
Present company accepted,
of course. Yeah. And that is high praise. I mean, we've had some phenomenal speakers. I give Jay a ton of credit for his ability to find and mine and promote talent. And he's also done, I think, a really good job of figuring out kind of where the industry is going, and I think he's paid really good attention to that and making sure that we're delivering material that matters for the audience as well. And I admit that it's the reps that get you there, though, right? Mm-hmm. And that's, again, part of what I think is so powerful about that series that we've been a part of, that you get that opportunity to do it again and again and again and again.
Right.
And it also gives you that confidence, right? Like the first time I did a presentation, I will never forget, like, opening my laptop and it just like rebooted itself. And I was terrified, because I'm like, oh my God, this presentation starts in like 8 minutes. And I'm, like scrambling, getting my machine back up and running. The nice thing is I didn't have time to get nervous, because I was so worried about getting the machine going that then it went and I was off. And my wife was actually with me on that trip, and she was kind of lurking, and she said, once I heard the first laugh, I knew you were good.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah. But it is something that you get comfortable with, right? So to your point about what talk am I giving, Neil Busing, who I think from the Kafka community, he's based here in the Twin Cities. He and I worked together at one point, and he came up to me, this was probably like a Wednesday, Thursday before a No Fluff event, and said, hey, what talks are you giving this weekend? And I said, I don't know. And he's just like, what do you mean you don't know? I said, well, they're all written. Like, what's the big deal? And he was just kind of flabbergasted that I didn't, like, right off the top of my head, couldn't tell you what I was doing. But I had a conversation it was either yesterday or Monday with some of our reps for a client thing I'm doing in July. And, I sent them this deck that they wanted me to present, and there's way more material in it that I can cover in the time they gave me. And so they're like, wow, how are you going to cut this all down? And I'm like, just tell me what time to start. Just tell me what time to end.
Right.
I'll take care of the rest. Don't worry.
I got this.
Yes. I will hit my number. And I take a lot of pride on, I'm going to hit my number plus or minus a minute.
See, the thing is, I mean, I always used to get really nervous before I go out there, and that'd be okay once I was out there.
Right.
But with No Fluff, I'm so comfortable now after, I mean, I think this is my, I don't know, 12th year or something like that,
I think so,
of being a regular on the tour. And that would make you, I don't know, 15 years, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. I think before my son was born, actually, was when I started.
I mean, Venkat Subramaniam was one of the initial group.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Stu Holloway and a few others, but you were in that second group, I think. And then I came along much later. No, actually, there's two things I want to mention because it'll get lost if I don't bring it up. First of all, you were talking about your history, and the part you haven't mentioned yet is where you are now. So I do want to at least give you a chance to mention that, because it's actually probably significant to a lot of our audience. Both of them, right?
Well, I'm on the same team as one of the Dans. Let's put it that way. So Dan Vega and I are both at VMware.
Yeah, right. And that's I don't know where Simon is from, and then there's a few others. At any rate, and the other thing is what's unique about, I'm telling the audience, what's unique about Nate, okay, in his presentations, is Nate will comfortably, and I mean this, comfortably go through 200 slides in a 45-minute talk. Or maybe maybe an hour and a half. Okay, let's say it's a 90-minute talk, but 200 slides without a problem. Oh, thanks, Simon in Belgium. Here, I should click on it. There we go. It's what's special about it, and what makes it an experience to watch. It's one of the reasons I really enjoy Nate's talks, is that he basically says, look, we're not using paper anymore, so let's not pretend that we have paper that we have to conserve. So he does one line per slide and just goes through over bang, 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 bang. And it's all nicely synchronized in time. So first of all, please let us know where you are. And secondly, I'd love to hear how you came up with that style, because you were the first person I ever saw employ it.
Sure. So I am at VMware. I'm part of the advocacy group there. Although, again, a big part of my job is hanging out with clients and helping them with whatever it is I can help them with, architectural decisions, culture change, et cetera. We did some work in May for a client that was kind of around how do we start shifting this culture. That's an important part of it. I think I've got a great job because I get to play with new toys and learn it and then go teach it to other people, rinse, repeat. And I've got a phenomenal team. I've got a best manager I've ever had in my life. And
wonderful.
Everybody should work for Tasha at some point, as far as I'm concerned, and I've made the comment multiple times, she's worth a significant amount of salary to me. So, I will follow her to the ends of the earth if that's what it takes. But
what's her last name?
Tasha Eisenberg.
Eisenberg. Thank you.
Yeah. So she's routinely part of she took over Spring One. So she's behind that, and she's, does a lot. She's a long-time event coordinator for us too. And keeps tabs on this menagerie that is our team, and, all over, because we're spread all over the globe. I think there's only a couple people that are even in the same time zone. We've got 3 people in Europe. We've got a couple people on the West Coast. Dan's in Ohio. I'm in Minnesota. We're not often in the same meet space.
You're locals, basically.
Yeah, I mean, Dan and I are about as close as you get in our team.
Yeah.
I think he and I will be together next week as KCDC, I think, right? If memory serves. Or is it?
Well, no, you'll both be at the VMware conference in Vegas, right?
Yeah, we'll be at Spring One or the VM World / Spring One.
Whatever they call it now,
yeah. That's a mystery to me. I've seen it, but my brain doesn't always register. I just know we're there and we're doing stuff. So we'll and I keep hearing allusions that Tasha has plans, so that makes me both excited and nervous at the same time.
One comment on that: when you were at where did I see you? I guess it was probably Dev Nexus.
Yeah,
that you and Dan gave a talk together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and it was Laurel and Hardy. I got to tell you, I mean, Dan's trying to give this talk nice, straight. Here's the information. This is what you need to know. Let me show you a demo. And basically Nate was just up there cracking jokes and making comments and just throwing in oh, and by the way, blah, 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 and crack everybody up. I mean, really, he was your straight man. And
well,
it was
I'm the stand-in for the audience, really. I'm the one who's like, I'm going to ask the question that you're afraid to ask, and then Dan's going to show you how to do it. And because I recognize where my bounds are. I've done live coding in presentations. I did live coding JavaScript stuff in the past. So, I mean, I can do it, but I also realize that I don't want people to watch me type.
But at any rate, I didn't want to interrupt. I just want to forget that one. So how did you acquire this presentation style where you wound up with so many slides that have so little information on each one, and yet kind of synchronize the flow of the narrative?
Sure.
So it all comes across very smoothly and comfortably.
So I'm heavily influenced by Lawrence Lessig in that regard. I remember seeing a presentation by him. It was like some video that ended up on the interwebs. This had to be like 04 or something like that. I mean, I can remember, I can see the cube I was sitting in when I was watching it. And so that must tell me it was around 04. And it was this amazing spoken word over these words, and then the words were appearing in some cases as he was speaking. I'm just like, oh, wow, that's amazing. Because we've all seen countless examples of the bullet riddled corpse of just bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. And I hated those. I hated creating those. I actually had built a sort of training thing around sort of test driven development. And when I left that organization, somebody's like, well, before you leave, you really need to convert this into better slides, because I was using my style of slideware. And they're like, well, why? And they're like, because no one can deliver this except you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I wrote you a complete document, a prose companion that goes along with it, a 15, 16 page Word doc. I think somebody can just create their own deck. No, we need you to make. And so I gave them the most god awful bullet riddled corpse I could come up with. And I had levels of it, and it was just terrible. I'm like, okay, here you go. But I hated those because as soon as you put 50, 60, 80, 100 words on a screen, people are reading it and they're not listening to you.
Right.
And the whole point of a presentation is to listen to the presenter. And as a presenter, I get to control time. I get to decide how long we spend on this slide, how quickly we go through these slides, whether we circle back, etc. If you want to read something, I'll write you a book or a report or a white paper, and you can read that. And then you are in control of time as the reader. That's a completely different medium. And I think where we get sort of in trouble is people try to create a slide deck that someone can read later without the presenter.
Right.
That never works. I'm adamantly of the opinion you cannot create a deck that works as both a takeaway and as something that you can deliver in front of an audience. It's going to hurt one or the other in terms of that modality. Yes. I'm going to optimize for the audience. Now, there was this one conference. I think it was a Rich Web experience, or maybe it was even an Ajax experience. It might even predate that. And I had a couple decks that were still bullet points and a couple decks that were my style. And I had a half a dozen attendees who were in both. And I quizzed them afterwards and I said, which presentation style do you like better? And every single one of them, hands down, I like the speaker notes exploded.
You did A/B testing. How about that? You did A/B testing of a presentation. Actually, that reminds me. I remember there was a get together where what do we call it? Speaker karaoke or something like that? No, what is it where they hand you a slide deck from somebody else and tell you to give the talk? Something like that.
That goes by a few different names. Speaker karaoke is one. There's, I think, Ignite would be another way. And it's usually a timed thing where you've got 20 seconds a slide and it's n number of slides. It's usually not super long. It's usually less, 3 or 4 minute kind of thing. But it's really intimidating because you have no idea what kind of deck you're going to get.
I think,
or what the topic is.
I think Neil Ford has that. Neil and Mark have actually. You're on that book too, right? The presentation patterns book.
Yeah.
Isn't that one of the anti-patterns called something about used sneakers? I think it was.
Wearing someone else's shoes.
Yeah, right.
So and trying to present someone else's desk.
You just don't know what to do. Because I had a problem like that once. I think I don't know if I told you about it. I was supposed to give a presentation at the New York Java SIG, which is really nice. I love going there, and the people are phenomenal. And of course, they're really, really good. So there's a lot of pressure. And I was going to give a talk on functional programming in Java, Kotlin, and Groovy. I was going to do examples in all three. And I have the slides worked out. I have a GitHub repository. And then it turned out I wasn't going to be able to make it. That was when I was in the hospital that time. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? Because I can't miss
that
it.
old excuse.
But I felt bad. So I thought, well, all right, who do I know who could step in and do this talk remotely? Because it was going to be remote anyway. It was more or less pandemic winding down, but everybody technically winding down, even though it's not really winding down. And it was remote. That was the point.
Yeah.
So I contacted Venkat, Venkat Subramaniam. I mean, I knew he could do it.
Wonderfully lifelike.
I said, yeah, exactly. Remarkably lifelike, right? And I said, hey, I got to do this talk and I'm not going to be able to do it. Can you handle it? And he went, sure. And of course, it was only later I realized that it was like, oh, yeah, really going to be a tough sell there. Would you give a talk about all these cool subjects to one of the best audiences in the world remotely? It's like, oh, yeah, I'm really going to have to twist Venkat's arm about this. Well, later, and of course, the talk apparently went well, but later I found out. I gave him my slides. I gave him my GitHub repository. He said, oh, okay, put all that aside. And he live coded the whole thing because that's what he does, And I was so annoyed that he hadn't used any of the stuff I prepared, that when I met up later with the people from the SIG in the fall, I said, I want to come back for real this time. And the topic of my talk is going to be, I prepared a talk and Venkat screwed it up. Basically, it was like, all right, here's what he was supposed to say, and just do all of that stuff. It's like somebody's already like, yeah, Venkat using slides. He does every once in a while. He does on keynotes. He doesn't live code a keynote. He didn't have shoes on, of course, but that's a different issue. No. Yeah,
we have to be comfortable.
Yeah, so I made it part of the gag. I didn't tell you what happened in that talk. When I went down to the Java SIG, of course, I contacted Venkat a couple days ahead of time. We set this up. So I go down there, and of course, in the talk, I'm trashing him that he didn't do what he was supposed to do. And here, I'm going to correct all the errors he made and get this right. And then my cell phone rings in the middle of the talk, and I look down and I go, oh, I got to take this. And of course, it's Venkat. I planned for him to call me. He was going to give me a hard time about trashing him or whatever. But actually what he did is, Rodrigo Graciano, right? Yeah. Well, he had just become a Java champion, and he was there. So Venkat was calling, and we said, oh, why don't you call him and congratulate him for being a Java champion or something. But it was really funny. And of course, when he called, Rodrigo had stepped out of the room. So he wasn't even there. So I bantered with him for a few minutes, and we hung up. And then he called back 15 minutes later. And then Rodrigo was there, and he was able to say it to him. So it all worked out like that. But actually, there's a question: did I ever give that talk? Would I happen to have the link? See, now that's an interesting question I should talk to you about. First of all, I don't have the link handy right now, but the New York Java SIG has a YouTube channel, and they recorded the talk, and it's on their YouTube channel. So if you just search for, let's see, NY Java SIG, I'll put it in the comment here, and look on YouTube for that. I know they have a channel, and I know they were recording it at the time. And hey, you got my email address. If you want to contact me directly, I can always send you the slides. Not that they're any good without the speaker, right? No, that's not true, actually. But regardless, yeah, be my guest. One of the questions that often comes up is whether you will make the slides available after a talk. Now, I've seen many different theories on this. Jeff Brown, for example, Jeff Scott Brown online or whatever. Jeff Brown is a brilliant speaker. He's just not on the tour anymore, and he doesn't do a lot of speaking.
Driest sense of humor ever.
Oh, it's awesome.
He's amazing.
Yeah, he'll roll a little joke bomb into the
and if you're not paying attention, you don't even miss it. I was in a hotel room with Jeff, Neil, Mark, and I think it was Graham Roche, if I remember right. And Jeff introduced Graham and Mark, and then just kind of under his breath said, Mark was the head architect of WebSphere. And Mark didn't catch it. And Graham was just like, whoa, well, what happened there? Like, what went wrong? And Mark, of course, had worked at IBM for a while. And so he was trying to kind of, it's calm, blah, blah, blah. And it took several minutes and Jeff's kind of over there like, he's not laughing, but I mean, you could tell, and I'm cracking up because I know what's going on. I heard the comment. And after a while, Mark's kind of like trying to figure out, why do you keep asking me about WebSphere? And then Jeff finally admits, well, I told him you were the head architect. And Mark's like,
Yeah, which he was appalled by, of course. No, what Jeff, his opinion seemed to be that the slides should not work without the presenter, and therefore there's no point in sharing them with anybody. That there's the idea that you could use the slides without the person presenting them was a waste. Now, I often felt that was an extreme position. I don't know that I agreed with that. Stu Halloway seemed to agree with that too, but Stu is the kind of guy who will have the slides and then go off on a complete incredible riff, but he's so good at it, it would be entertaining anyway, and then there's the other end where they say, yeah, sure, here's all the details, it's got everything in it, you don't need me at all. But on the other hand, I don't want to share my slides because I have to give this talk 6 more times. And if I've given them out, I no longer have control of this. I generally figure anything I presented is available to the public anyway, so I don't mind giving them out. But sometimes I do worry that a talk won't be accepted because I'm giving the same talk I gave elsewhere. So where do you fit on all this stuff?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm very much of the opinion that my slides are not super useful without me, which is why I don't think it's a big deal if somebody really wants my slides. Like, okay, I'll share them with you. I think there's a lot of people say they want the slides, they feel they need to have the slides, and I wish I could put something in there to actually tell, did you ever actually look at them?
Yeah.
Because my experience, my suspicion is maybe 1 out of 100 somebody goes back and actually looks at the slides, but they feel comfortable because they have them, and I mean, that's fine. So if it helps you to have them, I'm not going to be against that, because again, I'm pretty confident you're probably not going to be able to use this without me or someone like me presenting it. But I mean, I can see both arguments. I get a little bothered by events that record your stuff without asking, and then they just put it online without asking.
That's
I'd much rather you at least have that conversation with me beforehand, and I don't think I've ever said absolutely not, but it is a little weird when your stuff just kind of magically appears and you're like, oh, interesting.
Well, if you're recording the entire talk, that's a different issue, because that can cost you business. That can actually, and other people can wind up making money off of your talk, again, without your permission. That's the real key. I mean, I don't mind if it's all free, especially if I'm doing it for a user group. I mean, I'll do whatever for a user group. That's all fine. Now, the other question, actually, I think Simon brought this up. Like the slides to be an aid, not the whole content. Right. What I often like is the idea of having the slides available for the audience during the talk.
Sure.
Because that way they don't have to stare at the screen, or, some people, if you have vision issues or if people are in the way or whatever, you've got them locally and you could follow them that way. But the opposite end of the scale, Paul King, right? Paul is for those who don't know, is the head of the Groovy framework, and honestly, one of my personal heroes. I want to be Paul King when I grow up, but I'm never going to get there, kind of thing. I know I'll go to a Paul King talk because I want to support Paul. I like Paul. I really do. But Paul will try to stuff 200 slides into a 45-minute talk, and it won't fit. But I'll tell you something, those slides are awesome. And I can't tell you how many times when I was writing my first book, the Making Java Groovy book, it was very traumatic at times, because I would work something out, how do I use Groovy to do this or that in great detail, and I'd have to really struggle. And then I'd go on whatever it was, SlideShare, wherever he used to share out his slides, and he'd have a talk on that exact topic with way more detail and everything I ever needed to know, all written out like that. And back then I wasn't accustomed to checking first, but Paul, it's like I go to the talk to support him, and to see as kind of an amusing exercise, how far is he going to get into this slide deck anyway, But later I plan to use his slides, because everything you ever wanted to know and more is there, and it's awesome. But anyway, that's the opposite end of the scale. Now you used to be in the Java world a lot, and then you kind of moved into front end stuff, right? Or how did that work out?
So I built a lot of front ends for Java applications. I mean, I'm trying to think. I don't know that I've got anything running in production that's, well, I mean, there may be some things early in my career that weren't Java, but the vast majority of what I've written professionally was Java, JavaScript, etc. That has been my universe. Now, I mean, now I've done a lot more cloud stuff, so I'm slightly abstracted away from that. And I did a presentation this morning, and I was having a conversation with my producer about that, and it's challenging to keep up, especially if you're not doing it day in, day out, and you start to realize there's lots of changes that have happened, and you go, oh, that's not the right way to do this. And one of the things that is, I think, a real struggle in our space, especially with something like Java or Spring that has been around for 20 plus years, you Google for how do I do X, and you get 7 different ways of doing it. And it's like, which one's the right way? And they all work, but then you got to figure out.
Then you ask ChatGPT, and it gives you the answer from a year and a half ago.
Well, right. Now, I mean, I'm lucky, fortunate that I have people like you and Dan Vega and Deshaun Carter and Spring committers in my wheelhouse. And so
don't forget, Danny Hinojosa is still in the audience. So don't.
That's true. Daniel Hinojosa, and I can just go on to Slack or go to my text messages and be like, yo, what's the right way to do this? In fact, I just did that to Dan the other day. I sent him some code. I'm like, is there a better way to do this? This doesn't feel right. This feels icky. And he's like, no, like, that's it. I'm like, damn it. Okay. All right, fine. So it can be really challenging to look at these things and go, this was the right way to do it in 2015. And then we added this, and this was the right way to do it in 2017.
Right.
And then we added this, and this was the right way to do it in 2019. And then now there's this new feature that this is how you do it in 2023. And it's like, oh, okay. But they all work. It's just a matter of, and that's where in our space, I've had this conversation a lot. Right, best.
Yeah, right.
It's all least worst. That's all we're striving for here, is give me the least worst solution.
So a couple other things just to point out. First of all, the phrase we use on the tour is today's best practices are tomorrow's maintenance problems. But I mean, that's kind of
anti-patterns. That's the way I phrase it. Yeah.
Say it again.
Today's best practice is tomorrow's anti-pattern.
Okay, because there was a little glitch there on the feed when you did it. That was one. Another is, I have to say about Danny Hinojosa, he has one notable distinction from my point of view on the tour. He's about the only guy I know whose jokes are worse than mine. That's a strong statement, man. That is a bold statement, So, and I'll let him react to that however he would normally react to that. Yes. Now, tell me about the Thinking Architecturally book. How did that come about? What's that? How's that doing? What do you do with that now, et cetera?
So somewhere along the lines, I put together this presentation that I called Thinking Architecturally, and sort of my thoughts on what does it mean to be an architect, and how is that different than being a developer? What is that conversion? In fact, the thing I did today was developer to architect. That's a 2-part thing I do on O'Reilly.
I think I saw that talk before on the No Fluff tour.
You've certainly, I guarantee you've seen Thinking Architecturally at some point. It'd be shocking.
No, I mean the developer to architect one.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And some of that material is in there. I mean, I have this tendency to like take little chunks of things and put it together in new ways and come up with, different way of thinking about it or putting it in a different context. But it was really my thoughts around like, how do you keep up? How do you figure out what quality attributes make sense on a project? How do you decide, should I use A, B, or C? All this trade-off analysis. I put together this talk several years ago comparing Angular and React. And it's sort of like, which one should you use and how would you compare them? And this again is the real genius of the No Fluff tour. Because I had an opportunity to give that talk multiple times, the 3rd or 4th time I gave it, I recognized, wait a minute. The interesting part of this is not really React versus Angular. It's what did I do to compare them? What was that comparison like? And so I pulled that out, and that became a whole nother set of material. And so you start to kind of pull these together. Okay, this is what it means to think architecturally and how that's different than being a developer. And that's probably been one of it's certainly top 3 or 4 things that I get requested for the most often, and I've delivered repeatedly. Undoubtedly you can find versions of that on the interwebs from years past. In fact, at one point my son came up to me and he said I made some comment, and he said, yeah, no, I've seen you give that talk. And I'm like, What? He said, yeah, I found it online. I went, really? And so I said, well, what city was I in? And he said, oh, you're in DC. I went, oh, okay, that was a good version. Yeah, that was one of the best. You know,
See,
that
that's another
audience
No
was
Fluff.
trolling.
That's another No Fluff story, by the way, real quick, is that
Yeah.
if you want to put a No Fluff speaker under real pressure, corner them in a room at a conference and just say, okay, you got 5 seconds. What city are you in now? You know, yeah, exactly. So that's good. And of course I have to mention my son Xander wouldn't be caught dead watching one of my talks. So you know that's remarkable that your son actually cares.
He's still a teenager, and I assume he must have already exhausted everything else on the internet and couldn't find anything else to watch. I don't know. But I will say the what city am I in? I very distinctly remember waking up dark 30 for a flight in a Marriott somewhere and having this moment of panic that I can't get on an airplane this morning. I have a workshop. How did I? Oh my God! I'm my schedule. And then I went, oh no, that workshop was last week. Okay, that was a different Marriott. That of course, if you're at certain elements of the Marriott chain, you would know which Marriott you're in if you were blindfolded on the way in. And others definitely have more distinction and maybe more sort of character.
Then I need to ask you about your travel schedule. I mean, as a dev advocate now, I imagine I know you're going all over the world. You just mentioned you were in Portugal last week. That's J Nation, right?
J Nation, yep.
Yeah. So what's your travel schedule like these days? I mean, where were you? Where are you headed? You know, you're not making it to McMurdo Base in Antarctica yet, right?
I have knocked off all 6 continents.
Yeah.
So, but I have yet to be to Antarctica, although my wife, so I was stuck on 5 until the spring. And I had made this offhand comment to my manager, Tatasha, at one point. I said, hey, if you ever have an opportunity to get me to South America, I'm in, because I need South America. I got to go to South Africa with my team back before the pandemic. I got an opportunity to do Devox Morocco before the pandemic. And so I had been to Africa. I've been to Europe many times. I got to go to Australia for an event. My wife came with me on that trip. So did my son.
Expensive
trip,
yeah.
It's a long time on an airplane.
Yeah.
And I will say, as used to, like, when you travel a lot, you get used to changing time zones, and it gets easier, you know, especially as you gain status and you get to board early, and, you know, a lot of things kind of disappear. You know, I was with some friends somewhere and they had to change their flight thing. And they said, I was on hold with Delta for 2 hours before I talked to someone. I'm like, 2 hours? Like, I call, and its current hold time is 0 minutes, you know, and it's like, yeah, that's how that's supposed to work. But I mean, I paid a price to get there, though. Let me put it that way. So I was on 5 continents. My wife was on 5 continents. She had been to Brazil for work. She'd been to India for work. You know, we'd been to Europe together. And so she was trying to get to South Africa or Africa before I got to South America. And so when Tasha reached out and said, do you want to go to Brazil? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And my wife's like, no, you can't go to Brazil until I get to go to Africa. And I'm like, But we've now started having a conversation, especially with my son heading towards high school graduation.
Right.
Do we want to try to do a trip to like Antarctica? Because that would be pretty epic and not something that you're probably ever going to do twice in your life. So we'll see.
Well, whenever Venkat posts his, you know, because he does this tweet at the beginning of every month and talks about all the places he's going to be that month, which is just a reminder again that he's, as you say, remarkably lifelike. I always tell Venkat, you know, when are you going to visit Armstrong Station on the dark side of the moon? You know, he's already got the frequent flyer miles to get there, you know?
Yeah. He is, his level of travel is insane. And I remember being with him.
Yours is insane, actually, but go ahead.
It has quieted down. You know, I mean, it was very weird to go for like the 2 pre-pandemic years, 28 and 19. One year I was like 390 hours in the air. The other year I was like 410, something like that. You know, and I remember actually sitting with the head of our chief marketing officer. And I said to him, like, yeah, I just did the math, and I've spent like 10 and a half work weeks in the air. And he just sort of stared at me. And I'm like, well, I mean, that's what you pay me to do. So yeah, it's my job, Ian. So it's definitely slowed down a bit there, you know, and there's definitely been some pullback on travel budgets this year in particular, as companies sort of retrench with inflation and economy, et cetera.
I heard Josh Long saying something about that. And if Josh Long's complaining about not being able to travel enough, that's a big
problem. Well, I mean, so Josh is on my team, and if I had $1 for every time I heard Josh say I want to travel less, and then when I actually look at his travel schedule, I'm like, where's the less part coming in, Josh?
Right.
But I'm managing to get around. I this year I actually got 3 new countries this year, because I did Brazil, I did Helsinki, Finland, and then I just did Portugal. So those are 3 places I'd never managed to get before, and so that was kind of cool. It certainly is nowhere near the clip it was before. I mean, in the pre-pandemic era, there was my stupidest travel experience. I did an event in Florida. I had like 3 events in Florida back to back, and the weird thing about the way it was scheduled is I was speaking on Monday and Friday, and I didn't have anything in between. And we had first party events in Canada the week after, and that week we were in Paris. And so as I'm looking at the schedule, I'm like, hey, Tasha, do you want me to try to get to the Paris event? And she's like, yes, we need you. Someone had just left our team, and so we were down a person, and she's like, we really need you to get there. And so if you can make it work. And so I call the travel people, and they're like, yeah, sure, no problem. You can fly out of Tampa on Tuesday and you'll land Wednesday morning. You can take an Uber to the event. You can do the event. You can sleep a night in the hotel and fly back Thursday. You'll be back in Florida Thursday afternoon. I'm like, okay. So I went to Paris for like not even 24 hours. It was the 2 unique things for me on that trip. So I got an Uber from the airport. That's not abnormal, right? And then the next morning at the hotel, I pressed the Uber button, and a driver shows up. It was the same guy that had picked me up at the airport. And I thought, what are the odds of that? How many rideshare drivers are there in Paris?
Well, have you had flight crews recognize you yet?
Yeah. I've had pursers recognize me.
I mean, Venkat, he gets on the plane, they just hand him the keys. I mean, of course, but
it's not abnormal for the pilot to come out and thank Venkat.
Oh, good, Mr. Subramaniam, you're here. Yeah, it's just like on what was that movie, the George Clooney movie with the in the air,
up in the air, so,
up in the air, something like that, which was a remarkably sad movie, but it was the travel stuff was interesting,
Yeah, very fitting.
Of course, I think it was Jeff Brown who had issues with that movie, because in that movie, they flew through St. Louis. He was on American. That's where all his miles were on American. So they flew through St. Louis all the time. And Jeff's based there. And he was like, no, that's the wrong terminal. This is the wrong. That's not the gate you would use for this. And we're like, yeah, okay, fine. That must be how we sound to non-technical people when they talk about technical stuff on TV.
Well, if you know what to look for, you can tell. So O'Hare has very distinctive architecture, and you can tell, like that scene from the Home Alone where they're running through. That's O'Hare. You can see because of the glass dome. The DC metro system has a very distinct architecture, and you can always tell when that's actually being filmed in the DC metro as opposed to a metro station that is not at all DC.
How many times have you made that run at O'Hare from the C gates to the F gates or whatever, or the other way around? Because you've got a 40-minute connection and you just got to get over there,
For me, it's Hartsfield or Schiphol. That's where I tend to have to deal with those issues, because I'm a Delta flyer and I live in a hub. So for me, it's all hub to hub.
Oh, that's right.
And the only pain there is when you get on. I remember boarding a flight on, I think it was like a Thursday afternoon, and the gate agent made this comment saying, when I see a meth lab, I know it's Albuquerque. We're I think on season 5 of Breaking Bad right now with Everett Dano, and I keep pointing at him like, Daniel has actually gone to that car wash. But for me, it's that this Thursday afternoon flight, when you're going from Minneapolis to Atlanta, it's a charter basically. It's going to be full of people who are medallions. And the gate agent said, listen, everybody, there's 126 medallions on this flight. So when I say this boarding group, I'm sorry, silvers, you're going to have to wait until we call your boarding group. You can't just board, because there's the whole plane basically is people who have status, and those are the times where
one is at the back of the plane. Yeah, right.
Kind of, yeah. And you look at the upgrade list and you're like, I've seen instances where you are number 58 of 120 for 0 seats, and you're like, all right, checks out.
Yeah. No, that's yeah, that's right. You'd be a Delta. I mean, my home airport is in Bradley in Hartford, you know.
Yep.
So there's a handful
Been
of
there many
places I
times.
could fly direct, like Minneapolis is one,
Mhm.
but not that many, and it's very different. So I have most of my status is on United, and the rest is on Delta. Dan, by the way, is the guy who flies Southwest on purpose. I mean, he chooses to do that. The airline of crying babies, and he inflicts that upon himself, you know. But
It
we'll
could
have
be
him
worse.
on the stream anyway at some point. Let's we're getting closer to the end here. Let's talk about, for example, what are you working on these days? I mean, you're probably thinking already about upcoming releases and the cloud provider. Wasn't there a tweet today about something about Graal Native
Mm.
being released as a cloud provider now or something? Or any rate, what's going on with you and what are you interested in, and where are you going and all that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the native stuff is really interesting to me to
Mm,
see. For most of my career, you look at Java, and part of its genius really was that JIT and that runtime, that your application would get faster as it ran more and it learned more about your environment, and it could inline things because it knew, well, I've called this loop 10,000 times and every single time we've gone this route. So we're going to inline this route and not even bother doing the check. We'll take the cache miss if we hit it, but that's probably not going to happen. And then, just kind of being steeped and schooled in that, and I remember when .NET first came around, and I thought, well, why would I want to be able to write any language as long as it ran on a Windows machine? Like, well, I was very proud of the fact that with Java, write once, run anywhere, of course, write once, test everywhere. And so, when native images first came out, I thought, well, that seems kind of weird. Like, doesn't that
doesn't
sort of
it though?
defeat the
Yeah.
whole purpose? But
Uh-huh.
then you start seeing some of the differences. And
Mhm.
I've seen Deshaun and Dan and others do this, where we create a fairly simple application, we run it like normal in JVM, and like, here's how big it is, here how long it takes to start up. And now let's go ahead and compile that as a Graal native image and then see what happens. And now, to be fair, you're making some trade-offs there. It's going to take longer to build, and
Yes.
you're going to lose some of the dynamicism that you get from the JVM. I mean,
And
I've
the
had
app
that
is
conversation.
much bigger. Yeah.
Yeah, so on the JVM, it's going to be much bigger. On when you make it, for the native image, it's definitely going to be smaller, takes up less memory, and it's going to start almost instantaneously.
Right.
It's pretty interesting, and I've had that conversation actually with Brian a bit about that, and it's just a different set of trade-offs. Now, as an architect, I put that hat back on. The concern I have is when people start getting dogmatic about this, and everything should be running on GraalVM, and you should never use Java for lambdas. And it's like, no, guys, you got to be pragmatic. You got to be ruthlessly pragmatic. Functions are great as long as it fits your use case.
Right.
And I've heard people say, like, well, you can't use Java because it's slow. I'm like, really? Because I know high frequency traders that are using Java. So if
Right.
they can get away with Java, I'm pretty sure you can. And if your customers are going to feel the latency of a function, then you made a bad architectural choice. Try again.
Right.
So I think it's cool that we have options, right? And it gives us another tool in the toolkit. We have to make sure we're using it in the right spot, and that we understand what those trade-offs are, and that we don't just blindly grab for one over the other because that's what we've always done, or that's what we're used to using, or that's the new hotness, so I have to do that.
Right. Absolutely. Um, okay, well, if let's go toward a couple of the non-technical things that you and I always talk about. I mean, uh, for those who are not aware, Nate is a big-time golfer.
Mm-hmm. Very
Always
much so.
looking for an opportunity to get out there. It's interesting that I noticed that one of the Dans, Dan Vega, has recently cursed himself by taking up the game, and
He
I
has.
have sent him my condolences on that. But I mean, how do you be an active golfer and live in Minnesota? Those two things don't seem to go
Yeah,
together very well.
yeah. It's very depressing for at least 4 months out of the year. I will admit, so my home golf course last year, we put in a set of simulators, and so the board approved that purchase, and we added that. They go up in the fall, they come down in the spring, and you book it for like a half hour at a time, and that really helps. I mean, it's
Really?
not the same but I will. The funny thing is, in a 2 hour session on the simulator, I can play 3.5 rounds of golf, maybe 4 rounds if I'm really pushing.
Wow.
And and it's kind of nice because there's no walking in between shots. And so it's, you hit a ball, it shows you, it recycles, put a ball down, hit it again, grab the right club, and so I remember joking with a buddy of mine. I'm like, man, we're going to get out on the golf course and we're going to be on like the fourth hole going, why isn't this round over? We've been out here for 45 minutes,
and you never get a bad lie either. I mean,
yeah, so that helps. I have taken the occasional golf trip to kind of break up the winter. It is kind of nice to have that break. The other thing that I love to do is ride my bike. My bike's sitting over here to my right. And at least that you can do indoors. I've got a trainer down in the basement. And so my wife and I have put a fair amount of miles on there, already. And so that kind of helps. But there are definitely times where I think I really need to move somewhere else because it is kind of brutal.
The other thing, well, of course, I am rather surprised that apparently I'm the one who pointed you to Rose Zhang, her debut and everything. If you're not aware of Rose, her last name's spelled Zhang, but the announcers all pronounced it Zhang. So I don't know if that's how she pronounces it. She's from California. I saw a little bit of an interview with her, and she's got just a touch of that California Valley type of accent, which is great. She is the LPGA's answer to basically Tiger Woods. She is that good. I mean, literally, she
won her debut tournament.
I mean, oh my God.
That doesn't happen.
After going through winning everything an amateur can win. She had just won the NCAA tournament again, went pro, and her first tournament the following weekend, she won an extra holes in a playoff.
Yeah.
Just staggering.
To put it in perspective, when Tiger opened up as a pro, he played in, I think it was like the Greater Milwaukee Open or something like, I think it's got a different name now, but he finished like 67th or something. And that's more normal because you've probably never seen the golf course before. It's the first time that there's a whole nother set of pressure when you're a professional and you got to make the cut. And if you don't, you're not getting paid, and you've got to deal with travel arrangements. You're the one who's booking the hotels. You're you got to find somebody to do that for you if you've got enough cash. But it's a whole nother layer of things that you don't have to deal with as a college athlete. As a college athlete, coach is making all those decisions. And, so it definitely is a transition, and she clearly just blew right through it. So it'll be really interesting to see how she, succeeds moving forward.
The pressure she was under. And in the last round, she started the round with like a two or three stroke lead and lost it because she shot like 2 over, and yet steeled herself, made it into the playoff, and won on the second hole of the playoff because of course she did. It's like, oh my goodness. Right. So at any rate, it's somebody to keep track of, somebody to keep an eye on. The other thing, of course, that I have to mention to you because it's inevitable. So what'd you think of the final episode of Ted Lasso?
It's a great question. It was good. I was expecting it to be more emotional, I guess. And so spoilers, if you haven't seen it, spoilers.
Yeah. Spoilers for Ted Lasso.
I mean, we all kind of knew Ted was leaving. I mean, they'd made that very clear. And especially in the penultimate episode where he says, oh, well, I got some big news, and then fade to black. And so I was hoping maybe when you saw his ex-wife and his son and her boyfriend or whatever, and he was kind of, oh, this is gonna be 2 hours of boredom, and I kind of thought maybe they were gonna be like, you know what, we're gonna move to England, and maybe that they would shift that direction. Of course, that didn't happen.
No.
It's interesting because if you look at the actual listing, it's not the series finale. It was still listed as a season finale, which certainly implies, and the way they seem to set things up, the show can continue just minus Jason Sudeikis. Yeah, and I don't know if it's going to be the same. I mean, they may change the name. I mean, you look at the book that the Trench Grim Independent wrote, and it was the Ted Lasso way, and then they changed it to, I think it was the AFC Richmond way. So you could see this becoming AFC Richmond. And some of the critics of this season really bemoaned the fact that, I can't believe these episodes are so long. Like comedies are supposed to be 22 minutes. And I hated that. Yeah. Something, guys, it's streaming. Why do we have to fit into some artificial schedule that only existed because network television needed a schedule, which again was arbitrary. There's nothing magical about must start at 7 p.m. local time. So that to me felt wrong. And they, at least one of the criticisms that I saw was, well, maybe this can now return to really being this sort of workplace comedy that it kind of began as, if we extract some of that from it. I don't know. I think it can absolutely continue without him. I think it can actually still be fairly good, honestly.
I
It's
never
such a
saw
phenomenal ensemble.
I never saw Nate. I thought Nate was going to take over. I thought that was going to happen. I didn't think Roy Kent
Yeah.
was going to be the manager. That never occurred to me. I was convinced they were setting up Nate's return, but Nate
Mhm.
should have returned as an assistant coach. I mean, he's
Agreed.
going to be the
Not as
hottest young coach in the league, right? I
not
mean,
as the assistant to the Kit Man. Nice callback there to The Office.
which, okay, I get it, but this is the guy who's qualified, really. I mean, he's the
Sure,
genius, right? And
sure.
but okay, let's see how Roy goes. I mean, that works, I guess. So I thought it was decidedly mixed. I liked a lot
Mhm.
of it, and my
Yeah.
wife, of course, loved it. She loved all of it, you know?
Fantastic callbacks. I mean,
Yeah.
they did a great job with that. When his son says referee, and I'm just like, okay, well played. And there were so many of those that if you really took the time to invest in the show, I think they did an excellent job there. I am a little surprised that Sudeikis was so keen on being done with the show, when you consider how rare it is as an actor
Mm.
to have a hit, and have a hit that people want to be a part of, that they're trending, and such a great ensemble. I mean, such a great cast, great writing, and I have no idea what the pressure must be around. Hey, be funny, and I've seen some of those allusions to like the writer's room, where, all right, everybody, we got a show coming up in 4 hours, so write me some jokes, go, and I'm sure that's hard, but I'm a little surprised that he was so willing to kind of put that on the shelf, given that you never know as an actor when you're going to have a hit show again, if you're going to be a part of something like that. And again, just such a great group of actors. I mean, when are you going to have an opportunity to get that mixed together? It's very rare, and you would have thought that another season or two wouldn't have been unheard of, but
And then
I don't know.
Barry ended almost the same weekend,
Mhm.
which
Yeah,
again was remarkable. They decided, okay, that's it, we're done completely.
right. Right.
Any rate, very good. I should point out to anybody who's not aware, I ran this ticker once. Let me do it again. There's Nate's homepage, ntschutta.io.
Hopelessly outdated, but
Yeah, well, what homepage isn't, right?
true.
But okay, the book I know about is the Thinking Architecturally one. I know most of the other books I've seen your name on were co-authored with other
Mhm.
people. Are you writing anything? You working on videos? You working on anything that you want to mention at this point?
So I do have another report that I wrote called Responsible Microservices. So that's all my thoughts
Ooh,
around when you should use microservices.
where's
That was
that?
another one that sort of grew up as a presentation. Well, it started as a blog post, became a presentation, then became a report. So you can get that from us. That's available as a download from us also, I think, on the O'Reilly platform. I've actually got, I think behind me, you can sort of see a paper copy of Thinking Architecturally. Every so often, one of those appears in the wild. I never quite figured out what the magic is to get that to happen. But I am actually in the middle of a Fundamentals of Software Engineering book with Jakob Pillaman on my team. So he and I are taking a crack at that,
I know
see what
him.
kind of trouble that gets us into. So Jakob does a ton of Spring stuff, and he and I do stuff like Spring for architecture, things of that nature. But he and I are going to see if we can't come up with the book that'll. One of the things that occurred to me is there's this big gap between what we teach you in either a computer science program or in a boot camp, and then the things that really need you to know when you are become a professional software engineer, developer type person. And so it's sort of trying to give that 10,000 foot overview of here's all the little gaps in your knowledge and here's where to go to get more. So we'll give you a cursory understanding of that. Like I just wrote the chapter on like UI design. And so I can give you the overview, and so it's, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 pages. And then here are some resources to get deeper into that. And so you can learn more if this is something you're passionate about. But, I was amazed at that sort of giant gap when I first got into industry, and you realize like, wow, this isn't anything like what I did in college.
Well, and
Projects done in
the
2 weeks.
transition that's happened in the industry is in the early days when I used to when I was doing Java and things like that back in the beginning, you'd buy a book because that was your only real resource other than, in fact, one of Java's truly innovative offerings at the beginning was the Java docs were free. And they had this complete library. You didn't have to buy anything because with C++, you had to buy the standard template library or whatever else you wanted to use. This one here, you've got the libraries, everything's free. You got the Java docs that are hyperlinked, you can click on things and go there. So what has changed in all that is that now books are often performing the role of, filtering. They are managing the overflow of information for you, letting you know what it needs to be prioritized, what's important and what isn't, that sort of thing. It sounds like that's more of what the role you're fitting into is.
Yeah, I think that's what we're shooting for anyway, is to at least shine a light on those gaps and help people try to close them, and my hope is that it serves as kind of that on-ramp. And the way I try to think about it is this is the book that I would have either liked to have gotten when I first started, or the book that I would want to hand to somebody who just started out of college on my team. It's okay, here's the stuff you don't know yet, and read through this and then let's talk. And, we can then craft a plan for how to move you forward from that point. But, to me, it's really just admitting there's a lot of stuff out there that you don't know yet.
Well, that sounds like something to look forward to. I will definitely take a look at that when it's available. I mean, if I miss it, let me know. I don't know when I'm going to see you. I mean, you're going to be at UberConf?
I'll be at UberConf. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, then I'll see you. UberConf, for those who are not aware, is the third week in July in Denver. Well, the Denver area anyway, in Denver. I've got a bunch of talks there, but not as many as I have had in the past. I mean, I don't have a full venkat or anything like that. I mean, I'm doing you
don't want to pull a muscle. I mean, I did a full venkat once at, I think it was a Rich Web. And so for those of you that don't know, that means you did every possible slot during a presentation week. And I think, I don't remember how many it was, if it was 17 or 18, but I mean, it was a lot of presentations in a 4-day span. And the ironic thing about that one is originally I had one open slot on like Thursday morning or something, and I was going to sleep in. And I thought, I'll get up and go down to breakfast. And I woke up and there was a text message from Jay saying, BSB's got food poisoning. Can you do a talk at 9?
Right.
Sure. And then I got to do the full venkat. But when that was over, I literally just sat in the pool and just floated for like an hour.
I mean, the level of venkat on those things, for those who are not aware, is that a full venkat is to do a talk in every available slot. A royal venkat is to also do the keynote and all those. And then at that conference where you wound up doing every single freaking talk in every slot available, he did what we now refer to as a full metal venkat, which is that, I mean, just to be ahead of you by one, right? We're convinced it's just to be ahead of you by one. Yeah. What did he do? He
did another talk that wasn't on the schedule. He just sort of like invented another one and got some people together, and it's like, all right, cool.
I swear, if he wasn't such a nice guy, he'd be really annoying,
Oh, he's fantastic. He's one of my favorite human beings. I'm going to be in Denver in July before UberConf, a couple weeks before, and I reached out to him hoping we could get together, and he's like, I'm going to be in Barcelona. I'm like,
of course he is. Because he'll be at UberConf. I mean, he'll be in Barcelona and then UberConf. Yeah.
Oh, of course.
No, I mean, half the time I have to fight the professional jealousy, and half the time I'm kind of honored that I even know the guy.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Agreed.
And he works 3 times harder than anybody I know, and I know people who work incredibly hard.
Yes.
So I mean, it's amazing. But the rest of us, what pass for humans, I guess you'd say. It'll be good to see you at UberConf. I won't be at Vegas at the spring one, but I will be monitoring the talks, and of course there'll be lots of announcements there. Sure. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring up or comment on before we wrap up?
Well, we didn't talk at all about generative AI. How do we manage to get through an hour and 10 minutes without saying Chat GPT at least once?
I have a Chat GPT joke I've been saving. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not terribly funny, just to warn you.
And I would expect nothing less.
Well, and it's also not mine. I harvested it somewhere. Yeah. Okay.
Did you ask Chat GPT to give you a joke about itself?
I've asked for jokes in the past, and the one real weakness I've detected in ChatGPT is the humor is not there. What it thinks is funny is not funny. You know, it doesn't have that level of subtlety. Maybe GPT-5 will have that. I don't know. But 4, not quite there. Good things, but that's not it. No, the ChatGPT joke I heard was ChatGPT walks into a bar. Bartender says, "What do you have?" ChatGPT says, "What's everybody else having?"
Nice.
That's it. Nice. I need the rim shot.
Yeah, I don't have a soundboard for you. I'm sorry.
Well, actually, what I have is the website that I use on my video version of the Tales from the Jar Side blog every week is called instantrimshot.com. It's got a big red button. Yeah. Well, here I can bring that up. I know you can't see it, but I can. Ready?
Yeah.
There we go. Did that come through?
I didn't hear it on my speakers, but it's possible.
Oh, you didn't hear it. All right. Well, at any rate, I have it. And if we had more time, I'd show it to you. But there you go.
I can give you a bad dad joke.
Good. Okay.
And I may have even stolen this from you. I can't remember. But Roman walks into a bar and holds up 2 fingers and orders 5 beers. 5 beers, please. So.
Very good. Yeah. Like Roman sizes make no sense at all. How come a 40 is an XL? You know, it's like just crazy.
I just work here.
At any rate. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. For the record, I was originally planning to try to make this live stream happen weekly, and it's just too hard to coordinate schedules like that. There's just too many people who are too busy. So I'm now hoping to keep this bi-weekly, you know, every other week. And we'll see how that goes. But I've got a list of people I'd like to invite on here, and it's an excuse to sit around and talk to people about whatever. That's
exactly why I started doing this, because I missed seeing my friends during the pandemic.
For the people who don't know, say something about your screencast.
Yeah, so on most Mondays, not every Monday, I do a live stream that goes out to Twitch, it goes out to LinkedIn, it goes out to YouTube, called Between Chair and Keyboard, otherwise known as BCAC. And that, of course, comes from between. Problem exists between chair and keyboard,
or keyboard and chair. But okay.
I mean, you can have all sorts of debates about which one comes first. I try to put the human first. I'm sure you would say CHI instead of HCI. You know, human computer interaction, not computer human interaction. There's an appropriate way to do it, and it's called HCI. Thank you.
So how do they find this? How do they find the podcast? The screen.
So I usually tweet about it, and it's on our Twitch stream. You can find it on. I've got a YouTube channel out there somewhere, I think, that I've just started to poke things out, and you can find it on our VMware Tanzu TV as well. So we're fairly easy to find these days. But it was the same reason that you're doing this. I just like to talk to my friends.
Yeah,
and I missed the hallway track. This is the best part about conferences, is bumping into your friends and having these kind of one-off conversations. I missed it so much during the pandemic, and
I still get the dopamine hit when people subscribe to my YouTube channel. So, you know, so that's a good thing too, which is dangerous, right? You shouldn't be addicted to things like that. You know, I know this is bad for me, and I'm doing it anyway. And I guess I'm just at that age.
Well, you're a human.
Well, I don't see any other questions, comments, words of wisdom. Nobody's offered any worse jokes. Why don't we consider that to be, we'll put that in the win column.
Love it.
You know, and
declare victory.
Yes. And thank you very much. And I will see you in the future.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Take care, man. Bye-bye.